Welcome, Wapplers from around the world. This is our Wappler meetup for June 2024. We have Wappler meetups the second Friday of each month, where Wapplers get together and talk everything Wappler. Today, we have a VIP guest with us today, John Stanton from the UK. Thank you for joining us. We have our presenter today is Mr. Baub, Rock and Roll Iceman. Starred in the movie Top Gun. Yeah, the these meetups are hosted the second Friday of every month at 4 p.m. Netherlands time. If you're a Wappler that has a site that you like to show off, you have a secret uh, solution or workflow that you use for Wappler, other Wapplers would love to hear from you. It may seem weird, but Wapplers love to watch other Wapplers program because there's always 2, 3, or 4 different ways to accomplish the same objective. So if you feel like sharing, reach out to Mark one of the forum. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Baub Iceman to talk about APIs. Baub, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I guess my presentation today is kind of a basics of APIs and some ways to troubleshoot those issues. I'm not going to go into super details on some stuff, but if you're unfamiliar with APIs, it's probably one of the strongest points of Wapplers being able to connect to other data, because more and more providers are presenting ways to get the data that you need. I'm going to start off here. I'm going to try to share my screen, see if I can share this. Okay, can everybody see that? My demo page, can you, it's,
that's all good.
Okay, so this is just a basic page that I created that goes out to an API, and I'm going to kind of show you how it's built. I'm going to show you how it's authenticated, and then kind of how to test for it, because I use a bunch of different APIs and they kind of all have different authentication methods. So I'm going to kind of walk through that. So if anybody has questions, or if I'm going too fast, or something doesn't seem completely clear, stop me and ask some questions. So this is the basic page. What we're doing is, let's see here. DocSpring, did I list templates? Okay, so this is DocSpring. It's a PDF site that we upload PDFs, and then we download the information from the PDFs. So basically, our first thing here is our HTTP request. That's just what it is, and then you have to authorize that request. Okay, and so they have a token, and then you have a secret. Okay, and then that's generated. Here we sign in to our account. We pick we set a token up that we want, a security token. I set up a test one because I had to go back through some of my information and delete the security information on them so that it didn't show up on this presentation. But anyways, that's just let's see where we go. Okay, so here's our example of our authorization. It's going to be basic, and then it's going to have this code here. And what this does is it takes the token ID, and then it takes the secret, and you put them together with a semicolon, okay? And then we have to encode it in base 64 to get our authentication token the way we want it to, okay? So if we go back to DocSpring, my Wappler token, I can look at it, be secret, and just there's my ID. There's my secret. They're test tokens, so you can steal those if you want. I don't care. I'm going to delete it after this presentation. So now I'm going to go to Wappler, and I'm going to go to, this is my API here. Okay. So what I have to do is I have to take my token ID, I have to take my token secret, and combine those, and then encrypt them, and then run the API with that login information. So I've just got my first here. I've got my token ID, and here's where my value was. And the thing too is with as I'm setting these values, you don't want to set the output. You don't want to push this data to the browser because that would be a security issue. So I'm just going to leave that unchecked. So I got my token ID. Here's my value. I got my token secret, and here's my value. Then my next one is my set value. This is where I take my token ID, I add my semicolon or my colon there, and then my token secret. So that puts them together. And
Can
then
you
my
show us what the code looks like?
sure. Let me move.
And what part are you making up? You make up the token secret, you just make one or what?
For the secret?
Right.
No. It came from the
Oh, from the dot spring, okay.
yeah, from DocSpring.
So which one are you making up? The
I'm
other
not
one.
I'm not making up
Oh, you're not making anything. Okay.
I'm not making either of them. Here's my ID,
Got it.
and then there's my secret. All right. So I go back here. So I combine them there, and we'll look at it here. You want to see the code. Yeah, so basically all it's doing there is just taking the ID, we're adding a colon in the middle, and then I'm adding the secret. So I combine that together. And then the fourth step is to actually go in there and take what I combined, and I'm going to encode it to base 64. That's just, if I go in here, I'll show you how to do it. We'll just close that out. I go in here, set my value, which is my combines. Okay. I go in here, click here. I go into cryptographic, and then I want to code it base 64. So now that's my ID, my semicolon, and my token secret, and then I encrypt it into base 64. And then now here's my actual API that we're going to use, and this one's super basic. We're going to go into some a little more complicated ones, but I just kind of want to show how the authentication works. So here's my URL that we got from the DocSpring site. I'm telling it what method I want to get, and most of the time on the API sites, it'll show you if it's a get, if it's a post, or if it's a delete. It'll show you which one you're supposed to use. And then for here, I'm just using auto and authorizations none, and I'm using down here my authorization. I'm using, or my headers, I'm using the authorization, and then basic space plus encrypted. And the encrypted is this data right here. And that matches our encryption, our authentication method there. So that authenticates it. And the different APIs have different ways you have to authenticate in it. Some use OAuth 2, some use just the basic authentication. And once I show how this works, next we'll go to Postman, and I'll kind of show you how to test the different methods that you use to see if your data is being inserted in there correctly. Okay, so here we go. We got it in there, and then that's our API. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. And now if we go to our test page here, all right. So what I end up doing is I create a server connect, and I go out to my Wappler 2. Oh, look at that pen. That's so great. It just takes you right to the page you want to edit. And that brings your API into the page. So that loads the data. I'm sorry. Jumping around here too fast. If I'm going too fast, tell me. I'm just okay. So that's our API. And then here's our test page. And then from there, I can just go down to my responsive table, and I'm just going to run this. If you want to add a new one, and then you just you populate it with the data that you pulled in from there. Oh yeah, okay. So does anybody have any questions on that? I mean, it's pretty straightforward so far on what we're doing.
Can you show me where you pulled the data from again?
Sure. So I created a server connect here. And all I did was call that API.
Okay.
So I just select server connect. I would drop down to, it's under test, Wappler test 1. That's the API I created, the one we were looking at. And then just select that. That's your data source now. Now it just acts like a regular server connect. I've got the data in there. I can pull up a single response. I can pull up, I can create a responsive table from it, which is what I did here. And we'll look at the schema here in a second, a little closer on this data. But you can move that over there. Oh yeah, that's the way to do it. Okay, I can move that. The pictures on the other screen. Yeah, and see, I can go through and oops, that's not what I'm gonna do. What we want to do is go back to Wappler test 1. Here's API. Now the one thing, I don't know if I should show this yet. Let's talk about Postman, and we're going to come back to this because we still have to define our API, our schema here in our API, what data, so that when you open in a Wappler that you can see it. So the next thing we're going to talk about is Postman. All right, and I'm going to open up Postman here. Now what Postman does is it's a software, it's free, you can download it. It's postman.com, I believe is the URL. And I've got a couple of these where I'll take the, when we're done or whatever, I've got the links to these and I'll post them so that people can, if they're not familiar with them, you can grab the IDs to where to get them. What Postman does is run APIs outside of Wappler. So it's kind of like an API playground to test your APIs. Because sometimes I'll be in Wappler and I'm like, this doesn't work. I can't figure it out. What's going on? So this gives you, are you authenticating correctly? Is your JSON data correct the way it should be? And stuff like that. And you can actually run the commands. Because see, here's what we did from our DocSpring, our URL. We're just looking at templates and see, here's our get. We want to send, get, post, dispatch, whatever method you want to send it in. And then I can just hit send and it'll actually send the query. And this is the data that it's returned that we're seeing on the other page. And this is all the data in the JSON format. Now there's authorization. And once again, there's different authorization methods for how this works. So you got to kind of figure out for the APIs, and most of the time they have the authentication method of how you have to do it to authenticate the API. So here I'm just doing my username and my password here. And the one cool thing that I like about Postman is it will do the base 64 encryption for you. So if I go to my headers here under authorization, it shows my entire just not slide. Yeah. So see, there's my entire authorization that's encrypted for base 64. So basically I can take that and I just copy that. And then in Wappler, when I do define my API schema, see, it's wanting the authentication stuff added here. Because if I don't add this here and I just hit fetch schema, oh, there's an error. You're not authorized. So what I can do is I can paste that entire authentication that I grabbed from there and fetch schema. I don't know if it'll work because it already has the schema. But this is the schema here. It's the data and the headers. This is the information that you're going to get from that API. And all of this information now is available in Wappler because I pulled the schema from that. But I had to authenticate it. Okay, so there's different ways you can do that. And we can talk about that more if you have questions about that. I'm just doing a basic example. And like I said, each of the different APIs kind of does it differently. And that's the cool thing about Postman is like, am I authenticating to the API correctly? Yes or no? Okay, boom. Here's here's my data here that I'm looking for. So it's working right. So now when I go into Wappler and I'm trying to test my data here, it helps me troubleshoot, is my authentication right? Do I have it encrypted correctly? You're going to kind of know that stuff before you go into there. And then, once we're in here in our responsive table, we go back to here. All of these, if I go in here and let's just do this. When I go in there to pick, see, here's all my schema. It's already been imported in here, and I don't have to know the names or any of this stuff. It's just already there because I imported the schema from Wappler. And then I can just, pick which fields I want to show up on my table. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to talk about here is, let's see, I want to pick the right thing here. Okay. That's the UPS Authenticate. Let's do this one. Sorry, I'm jumping around here, trying to get the right page.
You're doing fine.
Okay, so now this is another API that I've, it's a library test. Do we want to do that yet? No. Let's see what's this. I've got it two ways because you can this let's see. I can't see because my things are up there. Okay, so the one thing I want to show you, this is just an API here, and there's actually a bunch of JSON data in here. This is because kind of like once you get your API working with the test data in Postman, and I'm sending the data right, I'm getting the data back that I want correctly. Now I need to put variables from Wappler and send form data to the API or send stuff to the API. And so this is where our JSON data is here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this JSON data. I'm just copying it. All right. Now I'm going to go to I got this menu for Zoom at the top and I can't see is there a way to move that thing? Let's see. No, that's
More passes?
That's not it. Sorry, I got this menu at the top and I can't seem to.
Can you minimize the window?
Check. Kits.
Sorry. Anybody know how to get this? I can't get to the top of my thing because it says it has Zoom controls up here. Is there a way to move that?
You should be able to drag them.
Just
Drag
okay.
them wide.
Is there a minimize thing or something? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, a mouse over and just drag it.
All right. Okay. So here is, and I'll put the URL on this. This is a JSON formatter and validator. Okay. So I'm going to drop my JSON code in here and then I'm going to process it. Okay. So when it comes through and says it's valid, because what happens is a lot of times when you're starting to put a bunch of JSON code and you got parentheses and you've got commas and you're editing that stuff, you'll have one little error in there for some reason. You missed a comma, you missed a parenthesis, something like that. And then in Wappler, you're trying to troubleshoot the server connector, the API. You're like, oh man, I can't figure, what's the problem here? You're chasing some weird errors. First thing I like to do is take my JSON data, pop it in here, and then validate it. Because if we take the same data and let's just remove a comma. I missed a comma in my code and I process it. Boom, it says it's invalid. There's a problem. And so I go down through the code. Oh, look, right here is where your issue is. So it helps when you've got huge amounts of JSON data and you're trying to figure it out, go in here and validate it. Because you can also go in here and close this stuff up when you're trying to figure out what data is what and where. It helps to validate the data. It helps it look a lot simpler when you're trying to troubleshoot which data you're actually trying to pull from your API. So this is when I found this JSON validator, I'm like, this is like the greatest thing I've ever seen. You know, it's like it solves so many problems and helps troubleshoot. At least you know you don't have a syntax error of some point messing you up. So that's a good thing to know when you're testing this stuff.
That's huge.
So the next thing I want to talk about just a little bit is now in the no, let's see. Let's go back to here. In Postman, a lot of API sites actually have all of their API data calls to where you can download them and import them directly into Postman. So these are my different API libraries that we have over here. And so I downloaded the Stripe API, and it shows every single API that they use. You know, and I know Wappler has some of this stuff built in, but sometimes you're doing stuff that's unorthodox or different, or you're building some stuff from scratch that's different. So you can go in here, you know, list all refunds, create a refund, whatever. Here's all your APIs, so you can pull those up, stick your authentication method in there, and then run the API externally and be able to test it.
Where did you get those from, Bob?
You can just go to Stripe, and they just have you just download their APIs. It's a usually it's a zip file of some sort, and you just import it into Postman. I can't think of what right here, just import. Click on the import button. It'll come up and just however, you can just drag and drop it in there. Usually it's a zip file of some sort. They have different ways to do it, but you can import the entire library of their APIs.
Oh.
So it speeds up a lot of this stuff. I gotta type this out. I copy and paste it, whatever. Bam! There's the entire thing you need there. And so there's a lot of like just some basic ones you can go through and understand how APIs are created. API video, I do some stuff there. These are all their. I pulled all these APIs from just their site. You can just and I think too that if you go to the Postman website, you can go in there and they have lists of APIs that they have this data for already.
I'm sorry, Bob. What exactly are we looking at here? Oh, this is DocSpring. My bad. So I doubt that you would know this unless you have experience in it, but this thing would apply to like Printful and Shopify, which I'm about to set up as well.
Right. What you do is you can search around the Shopify site, or you can go to postman.com, and they have API searches. So they like the Stripe one, I think that's where I found it. I just went to the Postman site. I searched the list of ones that they presented, and then just downloaded it into Postman, and bam, there's all your stuff already ready to go.
Also, Postman has that information. You just pull it from them.
That's correct. A lot of times the sites will have them, you get into frequently asked questions or go through the search, and sometimes you got to dig in a bit. But a lot of times they're there, but they're also on the Postman site.
Cool. And if not, then I'm sure that you just do the same thing you just did and set up the URL that you're getting it from, and if it's active for any kind of authorization, the same manner you did, and then you can pull it in.
That's correct. That's correct. So
right.
they'll always have an authentication method, and it'll say it's OAuth 2, it's basic, it's whatever, and it'll go through and kind of, some sites are just username password authentication. They're not even encrypted or anything like that. So there's different sites have different authentication methods, and they always have it listed.
So this DocSpring one was just a basic. That's what it was calling for.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Those templates. Yeah. So they'll say, see the authentication documentation for more information. You click here. It talks about the tokens. It says this is what kind of authentication we use. It's base 64 encoded. So that's the trick, knowing that it's base 64 encoded, and Wappler does that effortlessly to encode those tokens and secrets. Okay, so let's see. We went through the validator. That helps out a lot. Now, in this situation, what I did was, let's see if I have UPS authenticate. Okay, so here I created a library authentication. Okay, so instead of on each page or each time you have to use the API, you have to go through the steps of creating the client ID, the client secret, combining them together, and encode that once it's together, and then authenticate it. So what I did was, you go into, let's see, where's it at? You go into your library and you create a new library item here. And I have one just called APS or UPS authenticate. And then I have, if you notice, my values are set to my environmental variables. Okay. And I hope everybody knows how to set that up. I would show you my environmental variables, but there's a bunch of passwords in there, and I can't open that up. I mean, I guess I can
Oh,
open.
just do it, Bob. Just do it. We won't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Bob can share it, but then he'd have to kill us.
Yeah, and nobody on the internet would look at it, so it'd be fine.
Yeah, right.
Because what happens is, a lot of times, like if we go back to our these are our API tokens, and I've set one up here today specifically for this one so I could show it and not have to worry about it, as my authentication token, and it's a different color here. That means it's a test token. So what I end up doing is I have my testing site, and then I have my production site. Okay, so I set my environmental variables up so that I have my authentication for my testing site on one spot, and then my authentication for my live site on the other. Because what happens, and I know this from experience, is you go in there, you set it up, and pretty soon you've got 5 or 10 pages of stuff that you've created with this stuff. You're using your testing credentials, and now you want to go live. Well, now I got to go back through and go back through there and change all those credentials to the live credentials. So you can split it this way, and you can run your testing credentials on the testing site. You can use your live credentials on the live site. And that's what I've done with just creating this library item. And then I just use that whenever I need to authenticate an APIs. I use the library item. Let's see, because I think.
Sorry, still disillusioned, General, what the library is.
A library is a page that you can use more than one time. You create it, and then anytime you want to create another server extension or an API that needs authentication, I just add this. I make a call to this library item, and then I can reuse it a bunch of times, and I don't have to create this step every time that I create an API.
Oh, like you did on the first one.
Yes, correct.
Got it. Okay.
If you've never used the library, get reading up on it, because you will find it's a massive time saver.
Yeah, I didn't have any comprehension of that whatsoever.
Yeah,
because it's basically instead
Priceless.
of having to redo a step all the time, and then you can use environmental variables to pass things back and forth into that library item. I don't use them a lot, but at this point, for your authentication, because if you say, well, if I'm doing a shipping component to a website, well, you've got you got your check rates, you've got your submit the shipping thing, you've got your cancel shipping, you've got all these different segments that you're going to have to create, basically like CRUD pages for all of those different functions you want to use. So you don't want to have to sit there and recreate this section every time you create an API. You want to do it once with your library, and then just reuse that one all the time for your authentication.
Hey, Bob,
Right.
I just put and John Stanton is correct. I just put a link in the chat to creating reusable actions with Server Connect library.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
just saw that.
Wappler
Thank you.
docs.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's good. Let's see what else. Encrypting, authentication. Oh, I think that's close to it. Because you can also, if we go back to our Postman data here, if I take, I'm just going to go in here and copy. Oh, I can just do it right here. I can copy all that data from my JSON data from there. I can go back to my JSON validator, clear that out, and just drop that data back in there, paste. Okay, and so there's my data that I just popped in there. So now I can go back through there and actually look at my data and open and close it. So you're looking at actually what the data actually is. And another thing too that is good to know, and I didn't really know, is that if things are in these brackets, that means it's an array. So when you're looking at data and when you're trying to authenticate and create your JSON, those brackets mean that's actually it's an array data. So you have to put a number in there to get the array. If you don't know much about arrays, then you'll have to research arrays a little bit. But that's just kind of when you're looking at this data, and especially looking at it in this validator, knowing what data is an object and then what data are arrays and how to access that. And then here's just our test page. We called that data. Boom, that's that same data, but it's laid out using my oops, which one? Oh, right here. Yep. And I just did a responsive table. I brought the data in, and then I just added the fields that I need, and then there's my data in my Wappler page. And that's more or less it. Just kind of an overview of how to do APIs, how to test. The Postman helps a lot because I don't know how many times I'm trying to get an API to work. I'm like, what is wrong? I'm freaking out, and it's Wappler's doing something wrong, and blah blah blah, and I freak out. And you go back, and it's going to be a JSON syntax error, or you put the authentication in wrong. This gives you a way to kind of take that outside of Wappler. Am I using the API correctly? Yes. Okay. So now it's got to be a Wappler issue, or I'm not passing my variables from my forms or whatever into the API to call it, and that kind of separates the two so that you can troubleshoot them individually.
I love that part. I always love being able to get out of trouble faster than I get into it.
Very much so.
In
Yeah, thank you
addition,
very much for that Postman and that the JSON formatter.
in addition, doing that before you post in the form or pester Theodore, you can make sure you're dealing with accurate data first beforehand.
Yeah, very much so.
That's
So
right.
actually-
Because go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
Oh, sorry, Bob. I was going to say a good rule of thumb: if you're working with a new API you've not worked with before, get it working in Postman first.
That's correct. Yes.
And then once you've got it working in Postman, whatever you need in Wappler, Postman will show it to you.
Yeah, that's great self-education and cuts down the bad time, if you would, for Theodore.
Yeah. Well, I figured all this stuff out through a bunch of crying.
Can relate.
Like, it doesn't work. How do I fix it? And so you start doing some of this stuff, and you're like, oh, okay, it takes some of the guesswork out. Why am I getting data this way? Why is it? Well, because it's returning the data this way. Oh, okay, I'm not getting it right. Or am I importing my schema from the API correctly? And so some of that stuff is kind of takes a while to figure it out. But once you do, it's like, wow, this is really simple to add just so much strength and ability to use stuff, and opens up the whole world of data and information that you can use.
Yeah, really.
But that's more or less my presentation, I guess. Nothing super fancy or super detailed, but kind of an overview of how to look at this stuff and how to make it work.
are there any major differences between a get and a post? What you demonstrated was how to get data from a site. Uh, is it the same to post data, or is there a difference?
There's here. Let me show you. Let's see. Let's go back to here, and we'll just look at the Stripe data. It tells you what type you have to do to get the data you want, or
Okay.
to do the thing you want. You're not just guessing. It'll say if it's a get or it's a post on how that data needs to be submitted.
All right. And then everything else is the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome.
And there's way to, like, if you can, and I'm not going to go into it in depth, but in Postman you can like create create a new project, and then you can save the authentication so it remembers. So next time you go, oh, I'm going to test a new thing, you can bring it in. It remembers your authentication method automatically, or you can tell it to save that authentication method. And then it's got, if you look up at the top, along up here, these are different. You can have multiple different APIs open to test at a different time. You don't have to just have one. And then when you close out Postman, open back up, all of these windows are still open. Because what I'll do is you'll have an API that you tested a year ago, and then you're like, oh man, and you got to go back to it again. Well, it still has all that information saved in Postman, and you can go back and test it again. It'll still run the thing. And if it sends back an error, we go in our authorization here, and I'll just take one of the characters out, and then I'll send it again. It'll come back. Oh, invalid API token secret. So it'll send you back the error codes that it receives too, so you can deal with Wappler on what kind of data you're getting back for as success events or error events or anything like that. It'll shoot those back to you also.
In this Postman, it'll keep all these tabs open all the time. When you log out, log back in, they stay there.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow.
I mean, I think do you want to save, or I don't know, but I haven't used it specifically here lately up until this thing. I haven't been doing any API stuff here lately, but it'll ask you if you want to save, or maybe it just leaves them up there. I don't know. You just get in there and try it, and I think it saves them automatically.
I was going to say, yeah, it looks like if you log out and come back in and those things are staying there, then it's saving it in real time.
Yeah, I think it is, because I did close it and open it back up, and they were still there.
Right.
And I mean, because if you look at the ones I got, they're like, there's like a bunch of them there.
Yeah, that'll drive me nuts. Yeah.
Hey, Bob, are you using what version of Postman are you using? Basic, free, professional?
I'm using the free version.
Free version.
Yeah, the free. I at this point I haven't got to anything that has made me even think that I need a paid version. The free version does everything that I need.
That's awesome.
That sure is, man. Good job, Bob. Very good job.
Thank you. I tried to, I don't know, explain everything as simply as I could. I mean, I don't go into super details of Postman. I mean, once you get in there, you got to kind of start using it, and just the help files. And there's lots of help on Google and stuff for using Postman and figuring out which kind of authentication method you need, and whether it's OAuth 2 or if it's a basic, or because you go into your authentication, you've got a bunch of different OAuth 1, OAuth 2, basic, JWT, bearer token, API key, no auth if it's open. I mean, there's different. So you just got to figure out what your API is, and then figure out what your authentication is, because that's what's good. Because if you're authenticating correctly on Postman, then if it doesn't work in Wappler, then you're doing something wrong. You don't have it quite set in Wappler right, because sometimes, let's see, yeah, because sometimes here I just put a authorization header, and then my then the value that it wants a basic space plus my encrypted ID and password there, but sometimes, you're doing OA auth 2 authentication. It's different. You'd have to set up your OA auth, whatever, but there's kind of different ways to do it there. So if it works in Postman, then your passwords and your IDs and all that stuff's correct. And then you get to Wappler, then I'm doing something wrong, or I need to figure out, my authentication stuff here and try to troubleshoot that. If that makes sense.
And most providers of APIs will give you the kind of spec for that API. So to say it's a GET, it's a OAuth 2 authentication or whatever, and
That's
often
correct.
give you the schema as well, just so you know.
Yep.
It says that in whatever documentation of the API you're trying to use.
That's
Exactly.
correct. Yes. So that's it. Have you got questions? Other than that, that's more or less most of what I had. Pretty simple, but if you've never done it before, it can be overwhelming at times.
Well, I
But it can be
much appreciate the New York style, quick and done, and with the backup of Mark recording this thing.
Yeah, you can go back and watch, or you got questions or something, you can hit me up on the forum. It looks like there's a new chat feature on the forum. I just tried out with Mark the other day, and besides messaging, but you can hit me up there if you have specific questions. I can try to help you out if I can.
one quick question, Bob.
Sure, John.
Probably not for today. Well, definitely not for today. But have you done anything the other way around where you've created an API that other people will then use?
I have not, but I do have an application that I've talked about trying to do that with, because one of my big sites is Dock Realty, where they sell boats or boat slips and boat lifts, and they have like 20 years of data, and so the Lake of the Ozarks, I live in the Lake of the Ozarks, docks are a big thing here, but insurance companies, mortgage companies, and would sell something. Well, what's this dock worth? I don't know. Well, we got 20 years of sales data that shows how long it was on the market, what it sold for, what they listed for, all this data, and then also it auto generates comparables, to where I want to make an API so that if someone paid us a service, they can access the API. So then the insurance companies or the mortgage companies could then just send API requests to ours and get the data that they need for their appraisals to figure out what things are worth. So I've thought about doing it for that, but I haven't actually got to that point yet.
All
I'll
right.
say
That
I've
sounds
done it,
like
but I haven't done it securely. So I was intrigued as to how you would do the authentication part. I've done it where it's a public API.
Right. Well, I mean, even if it's public, you still have to authenticate it some way.
Yeah. I think that'll be a future one. How about?
You could just give them a URL and it will give them the JSON.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do open authentication, you could, but
yeah, that's all I've done so far.
Okay.
Well, Bob, that sounds like a future meetup later on in the year when you build your first API.
Okay.
I'll second that. I'll definitely second that.
I got hornswoggled into this one. You gotta watch about coming to these meetings, because then the next thing you know, you're the president, you're the presenter.
Mark has ways.
Yeah.
Bob, we you got a one Wappler per year, so you've got 12 months to put it together. No sweat.
Well, I tell you, if there's any requests that I could throw out there, is I would love to see someone do a good thorough thing on oh no, I'm drawing a blank. I'm drawing a blank. I have too much coffee, my brain won't work.
I could build one of those.
GitHub, like a good demonstration of GitHub and how it works with Wappler. I mean, it seems simple, but I know it's confusing to some people, and it's a bit confusing to me at times. It'd be nice to have someone that's a GitHub expert to kind of walk you through the whole thing, because I get confused on the the way the line goes to the side, and how do I go back to this line, or something happens, I need to go back to this code. And it's, looking at the document, we know the documentation on the Wappler site's not the best. It shows you how to do it, but it doesn't really answer questions, and it'd be nice for someone to kind of get together a good presentation of that. I think that would help out a lot of people. It would help out me out.
Yeah, I'll second that.
I'll make a note on GitHub.
There you go.
Or
Yeah.
Git generally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't have to be GitHub, but the in general, the Git stuff and how to back the files up and how to go back to code that you were already using, or go back to this line, or how it's just some of that stuff is
Create branches and merge and all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so based upon the feedback so far today, people are interested in libraries, global environment variables, arrays, and GitHub. Are there any other topics that anybody would be interested in?
Morning, guys. Good morning, guys. I want to second the creating your own API. That's definitely something that I would be interested in trying to figure out how to go about doing that. I do believe all the building blocks are there in Wappler. It's just to kind of get your head wrapped around it. Also, for me, mobile stuff is still not gotten around to kind of building out a mobile application using Wappler, and that's something I would like to see a bit more information on, being that it's completely new to me. So yeah.
All right, excellent. That's excellent input. Thank you very much. All right. Does anybody else have any questions about APIs or anything Wappler? We can open the floor up for discussions. Wappler is a phenomenal program. There's so many things that you can do, so many different ways, and it's made possible and growing because of folks like you that are active in the community. Thank you very much for joining us today. I think let's give Bob Iceman a round of applause and say thank you. Yay! And then John Stanton, a VIP guest, and also we have Ben Plaisher from Down Under in the middle of the night, probably in his pajamas. But thank you for joining us, Ben. We're very glad to have you on board. Ben has created all kinds of Wappler training video series that you can find on the Wappler YouTube channel that are just absolutely phenomenal. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If there's any Wapplers that are watching this and would like to make a presentation on something Wappler, whether you have a site that you want to show off, or a favorite way to accomplish something, or a new feature that you didn't know about. And if you didn't know about it, others don't know about it as well. So we'd love to hear it. So these Wapplers take place the second Friday of every month at 4 p.m. Netherlands time. And I wish everybody a very safe and prosperous rest of the month. Take care, and we'll talk to you next month.
Yeah, and happy
All right,
Father's Day
thanks.
to all.
Yes,
Thanks,
thanks, Bob.
guys.
Thanks. You're welcome.